Okay, there's not a New York volcano. I don't think. I think it's, everything else is real. Everything else. The earthquake stuff is real,
Now it's all unraveled.
Yeah, that's everything else. I don't remember. I did the research 6 years ago, and I can't really remember about the volcano. I think that's the one exaggeration. But, the earthquake stuff is real, and the like Indian Point nuclear facility was built on a fault line that they didn't know about when they built it. It's 25 miles away from here. There's a lot of, that section goes a lot longer. And there's a lot of other scare. The thing I'm most scared about, the two things I came away from the research knowing is that asteroids are not going to hit the Earth, for sure. That's something you can take that off the list. It's so unlikely that it's silly. And the other thing is that antibiotic-resistant pandemics will come. So you win some, you lose.
And either way, you won't forgive your parents.
But I think, the one thing I tried to do that I think, Sam, you do so well in your writing is that there's sort of these like larger scale catastrophes that you can obsess about and things you can obsess about on the level of society or culture. But there's also, I think we laugh when we talk about this. There's a humor to it because it's so far-fetched, and I think in connection at least to our daily lives, And I think there's a real temptation or convenience of sort of obsessing about these larger things, and thereby avoiding, the more personal, intimate problems that you actually may have some control of. And I think there's that tension is something that you write about really well. Sort of the whether it's the public sphere or sort of the professional sphere issues, as using those as a proxy to avoid, or as a way to avoid dealing with the stuff that's going on in your relationship. That it's a lot easier to worry about asteroids than to worry about having another child with your wife or something like that.
Yeah, anything to prop up the delusion, I think. And if the end of the world is there is useful,
Right.
you should by all means seize upon it. And there is a story about a guy who's sort of pimping the end of the world in the book as well.
Yeah, I thought you meant possibly a good story.
I didn't want to go up against your facts. No, and actually, I like that you researched them, and I also like that they may not even be the right numbers anymore because you researched. So there's kind of a nice movement between fiction and fact.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, it's the reason it works is because you researched it, but it doesn't really matter that you researched it at the same time.
Thanks. The numbers have only gotten worse. Every year they've had that probability tables shift every year.
And in the fun parts you have a lot of very short pieces in there. I'm just wondering what interested you in the short story.
Well, I don't know if I have a lot. I have a couple. So most of them I find too long to read at readings, but there are a few, and the short has always been interesting to me to see how compressed you can get, how much you can do in a limited amount of space, and I kind of think of short stories in general that way, but these are special cases. The shorter the piece, the more it's kind of approached as a sort of poem, I would say, and that interests me as well.
I have a question about your process that I'm always curious about is when you're deciding to publish a story collection, how does it work? Do you wait until you have a bunch of stories that you're really happy with, and then at that point you cut it off and because you're continuing to write stories and then publish a collection, or is it, to what degree do you think about connections between stories and having there be a sense that a collection is sort of a single expression of something as opposed to sort of a bunch of different things?
Yeah, I knew that this book wouldn't be linked in any traditional way. Linked only by the fact that I wrote them, but
right.
that I mean, I kind of know I'm a fan of the eclectic collection of stories, and I was writing while I was writing novels, I would write stories, and between novels I would write stories, and suddenly a pile was going, and at a certain point it seemed to me, wow, I have, you know, enough to claim that I am writing a collection of stories. And so then when I finished my last novel, I spent just a couple of years working on stories and thinking about it as a book, but never, then there became a few overlaps with characters and with a couple stories, but I wasn't interested in doing kind of a novel and stories or anything like that. I wanted to bring in a lot of different voices and styles, but have a few things relate to each other.
Yeah, I have to say I find it really refreshing because I mean, there does seem to be this tendency of this idea of the linked story collection. It's almost like an apology for not being a novel or something. Which is not to say they can't be great, but
Right.
but
I mean,
it's
sometimes
nice to
they
have
are,
yeah.
but sometimes they are, they're trying to pass as a novel or something like that. And because there's this idea, although this is now the year of the short story apparently.
Every year is the year
Right.
of the short story.
But you know, I guess in the past there was this idea that, you know, no one would buy a short story collection, which might be true, but doesn't mean you shouldn't write one.
I guess I have a follow-up to that. When I was listening to you read that story, I kind of thought that was a story you wrote as you were also writing the ask, as like kind of preparation for it. And so Katie and I had a little fight about whether or not it was a story you wrote before or after the ask. So I'd be kind of curious to know.
It's what do they call it after the big earthquake? The
aftershock.
it's an aftershock, or it's one of the quakes that come after the big one. Yeah, I wrote it after the ask.
That means Gideon.
That what?
No violence back there, okay?
What
Keep
did,
it-
what did you
keep it-
say?
Not
She
But
lost
that's
that
curious
fight.
to me that like all those themes kind of like stayed with you and that.
Well, sometimes you write about things and you're not done, you know, or you have a couple more ways you want to approach it. And again, that's not the full story. That's just kind of the opening gambit of a much longer piece. That's not like the ask. And so, you know, maybe that was my way in, sort of a tunnel from the ask to something new. I don't know, but yeah, it was written afterward.
Yeah, Sam, your books focus a great deal on guys enduring despair and failure, and
Well,
this
there's
book-
some women
Well,
here.
this book, you know, opens with a story.
Turns out they face despair and failure too.
Often
It's a
connected.
very different kind of story in that regard because of the gender shift. And anyway, discuss.
With you? Yeah, I had written from doing close third with female protagonists before, but nothing I liked and nothing I published, and I think I finally got to a point where I was able to write it in a way that I was satisfied with and thought worked, and found some characters that I felt connected to, in some ways a lot more than some of the men in the book.
Now, what was the balance like between the research and the actual writing of the story? Did you submerge yourself in worst case scenario research and then write it?
Yeah, I had the basic premise of the story in mind. I had the characters, and I started writing it, and then at a certain point I realized, well, I'm gonna have to obsessively research worst case scenarios the same way that Mitchell does, and then I went down a kind of wormhole too, and in an interesting way. I mean, I was interested to hear Sam talk about short fiction as being able to approach similar themes in novels that you might not have room for in the actual novel. I was doing nonfiction pieces in service to the novel along the way. So, you know, like I did a piece about how our cell phones causing brain tumors, and will we have the biggest health emergency in the history of the civilization in 15 years when everyone has brain tumors. So I like, maybe, yeah, I don't know. I still, yeah, we
But
don't.
then wasn't that the one where there was an issue about carrying it in your pants?
Yeah.
I read that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just the brain that's affected, potentially. Yeah, so, but that was a way for me to also to do research into this specific problem, but also to hang out with a lot of people who were obsessives about this issue, or activists, or, and so it was both about learning information, but also about understanding the mindset. And I think generally I'm just drawn to obsession, as I think you might be as well. And so yeah, the research. But then the other things about this research is like it's so easy to do now. You don't need to really go to. I mean, I did go to the library to access a few reports. Like there's this very important Army Corps of Engineers report about what would happen in a huge hurricane when a huge hurricane hits New York. That I drew all the technical information, most of the technical information about the storm from, and it was all accurate. So Sandy was followed exactly from that report. But for the most part, you can, if you have Google, like you can go find, or I guess a computer, you could go find the World Wide Web. Yeah, you could find anything you want, and you can go into these academic journals pretty easily and find every crazy thing you could ever want to learn about. So we now have the tools for obsession that we never had before. And so if you have any inclination towards it, you can really get carried away. I don't recommend it though.
Speaking of which, having done this work, do you find that fiction affects your dreams, or is it that the dreams affected the fiction?
Fiction affected, the research affected the dreams. Then I don't have very vivid dreams. Or I don't remember my dreams very well, so I don't know. But I think I've been haunted at periods of time writing this book. But at the same time, I think I also learned that you can't take it to heart. And there's something very focusing about reading about a lot of worst case scenarios, and that you realize, I think you become more appreciative for best case scenarios and good things, and also I think a greater sort of dedication to these sort of more personal issues that you can influence.
Do you have disaster kits in your home and car?
Disaster kits in my home and car. I don't. Yeah, I'm sort of very selectively anxious, so I don't hold cell phones to my head, but I don't have blocks of cash in my freezer or and part of it, the disaster kit is pretty stupid. It's like a puzzle to occupy yourself with, like playing cards, a flashlight. I guess I have a flashlight, but yeah. And I live in New Orleans now, which is, I really should have a disaster kit, but I guess I don't. Yeah. When the lights went out, we were just walking around in darkness for 3 days. Really stupid. Yeah.
For you, I was curious, do any of your characters in your stories or novels, do they live on in your imagination, or once it's finished and published, do they, is that the end of them, or do you still imagine their lives at times, what their lives are like? Do they still preoccupy your thoughts?
Is it for me?
For both, well, for Sam, but feel free to,
Yeah, sometimes they return. I have a character named Gary that I've been writing about for years. I don't know why. Usually it's just I'm writing something and a character emerges who's similar, and I feel, why call him Joe? He's obviously Gary. So sometimes just thinking about them as, I don't quite think of them as people living these independent lives, but I think of them of all the things I get to do when I write that character, and the things I don't get to do with other characters. And I guess when I feel the urge to be in that mode, you know, I return to a certain character sometimes. Yeah, but I don't have a sense that they're living parallel lives in some other, in an alternate universe. Although that would make me very powerful, actually.
Oh, no, I mean, I would just say that when I was writing the book, and this was over 5 or 6 years, I felt like everything, I'm always looking for things that I can use in the book, whether I'm, things I'm reading, experiences I'm having, research I'm doing, or news that I'm reading, I was always picking up details and everything gets filtered into the book, and then once the book is over, that stops, and then everything goes into whatever the next project is. But for 5 or 6 years, I was looking constantly, whether consciously or not, for stuff related to these themes in the novel.
I've noticed that recently in your nonfiction you've been writing about crime and violence. I wonder if that's going to filter into fiction at some point.
Yeah, I've recently been doing some pieces about crime. I think I'm drawn to crime for some reason. I film noir originally, and then actual reality noir. I guess I see it as a kind of, I've written about cases where people get imprisoned wrongly and wrongly convicted, and I feel like that's a kind of worst case scenario, right, where you're sent to jail for something you didn't do and can't get out, especially if it's in a foreign country, for instance. And so that kind of idea is interesting to me, although I should say my fiancée is a lawyer, and this is her greatest fear, is to end up in prison forever. And I always say, well, it wouldn't be so bad. It's kind of like a writing residency. You could read whatever you want all the time if they give you a pen and paper. And I think that she thinks that's insensitive.
I remember an old Saturday Night Live skit about that, actually. This prison warden was very proud that he turned his prison into a writing college. And they're cell typing.
What era was that in the show?
Maybe late 80s. But it might be true, except that I understand there's a lot of noise.
Yeah, you have to be in solitary.
And maybe you don't get the pen.
Right. It's really more commentary on what it's like to be an SNL writer. Yeah. Well, should we, if no one else has questions, we'll move
around. Do it. You're about to.